Hello students, myself Arvind Kodki, lecturer of Civil Department, Jain Polytechnic Belgavi. Today we are going to discuss the new scheme syllabus, environmental science. In that, the unit name ecosystem. So the different contents will be structure of ecosystem, biotic and abiotic components, food chain and food web. So before starting, we will discuss the what is meant by ecosystem and the structure of the ecosystem. An ecosystem, a community of living organisms in bond with the non-living components of their environment interacting as a system. In the sense, whatever the living organisms are there on the earth, just like plants, animals, even including the microbes, which are capable of breathing. In the sense, it will be taking some type of the gas and it will be releasing some other type of the gases. Those we say it as the living organisms. And whatever the living organisms are there, they will be bonding with the non-living components, just like the soils, atmosphere, the temperature, pressures, etc. Those components and of their own environment. If we consider the temperature near the poles, it is little icy. When it comes to the equator, it is heavy and high tempered areas. So we will be discussing the living organisms, how they will be related to non-living components and their own environment. So now we will be discussing the different factors affecting this ecosystem. One is, there are two types, one is external factors and the internal factors. I will be explaining one by one the external factors. The external factors will be of climate. So depending upon the climate, the interaction between living organisms or the components and the non-living components will be differs. Next, the parental material, the topography in the sense, the hilly region or the valley regions, the forested areas, the desert areas, the barren lands. Similarly, how it will be acting on the ecosystem. So there are many internal factors too. The decomposition. This is the process where the dead animals, it is going to decay itself by some of the living organisms, and they will be sending the different minerals which is present in the animal's body which is dead to the soil. The root competition, the shading in the sense, whenever you see the high sunlight, if you want to take a shade, you prefer the trees under which you will be standing. Even during heavy rains, you will be standing under a tree, which helps in shading of some or the other way this rain and the sunlight. Then the disturbance, the succession, and lastly the types of species, how they are bonding with the living and the non-living components in their the non-living components environment. So this is the system, how this ecosystem been divided. The first, there are two components. One is abiotic components and the biotic components. Abiotic components are divided into two categories, climatic and edaphic. Climatic, it has several parameters. Among them, they have been listed: the rain, light, wind, and the temperature. When it comes to edaphic in the sense, it is the material which we can be seen and which we can be touched. When it comes to climatic, the rain we can see and touch, but until and unless it is not going to mingle with the other material, we can see it. Similarly, the light we can see it, but we cannot touch. Similarly, the wind we can feel it. Similarly, the temperature we can feel it. But in the edaphic, there are different parameters which helps to understand how these abiotic components are present. The soil, in the sense the earth, how it is being made, we can study this. Even the pH value, it is the hydrogen ion concentration present in a material. Next, the minerals and the topography. Next, coming to the biotic components, there are three types of, there are three categories of biotic components. One is producers or autotrophs. Producers, in the sense they will be getting the abiotic components and they will be preparing their own food by some or the other methods, using some pigment which is present in their life cycle, and it will be producing its own food which helps in growing of its life. When it comes to the consumers or the heterotrophs, these are the dependent on the producers. Similarly, there are some different consumers which are dependent on the other consumers, which are having the producers as the consumption parameter. Then the last one is the decomposers or the saprotrophs. These are the living organisms which are present near the decaying components. In the sense, some of the animals, they are going to die, and they whatever the minerals are present in this animals, they need to be sent to the soil. Some of the decomposers will help in sharing, or they will be helping to send these minerals to the soil by decomposing methods. And in consumers, there are four types of consumers. Primary consumers, which are also known as herbivores. These are mainly the animals or the consumers which are dependent on the producers. And the secondary consumers are primary carnivores. These are the consumers or the animals which are very dependent on the primary consumers. Similarly, they will be sometimes they will be dependent on these producers too. Then there are tertiary consumers. They are dependent on the primary as well as secondary consumers. When it comes to the quaternary consumers or the omnivores, these are the animals which are, or the consumers which are dependent on all these three consumers, the primary, secondary and the tertiary consumers. So this is the schematic representation of the structure of the ecosystem, how this works under a given environment. So again, I will be explaining with some examples how these biotic and the abiotic components are differentiated. So the first thing is abiotic components. These are the non-living thing which prevailing environment in an ecosystem form an abiotic system. In the sense, whatever the non-living things, they are heading or they are leading the environment ecosystem or environment in the ecosystem, and these things have string influence on structure, distribution, behavior and interrelationship of the organisms. As we have been studied in our school days, whatever the body we have, it is made up of the type of a soil, but it is not a soil, but it is mixture of the flesh and the blood with the bones. As you know that the bones are rich in calcium, so it is type of stone, calcium carbonate or the calcium oxide. So depending on those materials, the bones are being prepared. In the sense, the calcium oxide and the calcium carbonate. These are the different types of the stones. Even we can say it as the type of a soil. Similarly, when it comes to the flesh, it is type of a proteins and the carbohydrates. These are main important for us to balance our body. Next, so I will be explaining the components. There are two types, the two components, the climatic and the adaptive components. The function of important factors will be soils are much more complex than the sediments. As we know that from our school days, they will be explaining what is the soil and the sediment. Soil, it is the material, it is being originated from the blasting of or weathering of these stones. When it comes to the sediments, sediments are the soil material or the dirt material which will be carried by one or the other media like this water, the air, or some animals, the birds or the animals which travel one place to other. These will make the sediments weak when it comes to the areas where the soils are more preferred than the sediments. Next, the atmosphere helps the organisms with carbon dioxide. The different atmospheres helps the organisms with CO2 for photosynthesis and O2 for respiration. Solar radiation is used to evaporate and transpire water into atmosphere. Next, the last, water is the medium for exchange of minerals between abiotic and biotic components. Next, the biotic components. The living organisms like plants, animals and microbes that present in an ecosystem forms biotic components. So based on the roles played in ecosystem, the biotic components are classified as primary or the producers, secondary as the consumers and tertiary the decomposers. So the producers, these are the biotic components which produce the foods or they manufacture the food in itself in the presence of solar radiation or the solar energy, the gas, carbon dioxide and the different minerals with water which will be grasped from the soil. At the last, the important factor is the chlorophyll. It is the pigment. In presence of this, the food is being prepared by these producers. Next, the consumers. They are dependent on the producers, and some consumers are dependent on the consumers itself. We call them as the carnivores. The last, the decomposers. These are uh, these are the decomposers, which means the decayers, which are present on every surfaces of producers, consumers. When these producers and the consumers die, the decomposer starts its working, which helps in transferring of the minerals which is present in the body of the biotic components. Next, the biotic and abiotic components. So this is the schematic picture which explains the biotic in the sense, bio in the sense it is the living, tic is the things. This is there is a tree, you can see. There is a tree, rabbit, the anemia, the bee and the leaf. These are all come under biotic components, in the sense living things. And it comes to the right side. On the other side, there is a chart of abiotic, in the sense non-living things. Abio in the sense it is non-living, tic is the things. There is a cloud with rain or precipitation, the drop of water, the wind, solar sun, and the temperature. These are comes under abiotic or the non-living things. So this is the spectacular view of this biotic and the abiotic components. Next, we will be studying the food chain and the food web. So initially, we can understand what is this food chain is. Chain in the sense it is the links connecting. In the sense, one link is being connected with some many links. Same here, the food chain, it is the linear process of consumption of food where it starts with producers and ends with the decomposers. Again, the cycle starts or cycle will be repeated. Just like the following figure, we can understand in that. And the food web, it is the network of food chains, and one consumer eats many subordinate levels. So this is one type of a food chain where the producers get some solar energy from the sun, minerals and the water will be taken by from the soil, and in the presence of chlorophyll and the gas carbon dioxide, it starts producing some of the food inside itself and it starts growing. This producer will be eaten by the primary consumers, we call it as herbivore, just like the grasshopper in this example. Then again this herbivore, the grasshopper, it is being eaten by the rats or the some birds. We call them as the secondary consumers. Next, the same rat, it is going to eat the cheese, which is the abiotic component. Even this cheese, it is the product of the milk, in the sense it is a fatty items. So it comes under some primary consumer only. Next, the tertiary consumer. Here I have shown the snake. The snake is going to eat the rat. Lastly, the tertiary or the quaternary consumer, the eagle will be hunting and eating the snakes. When this eagle dies, it will be laid on the ground, and because of these decomposers, this whatever the animal contains, the minerals, proteins, the other materials, it will be decayed and it will be transferred to the soil. Again, these nutrients or the minerals, they will be taken by this producer. So this we call it as the food chain. Then there is one more. This is the food web. You might have seen some type of spider web where one point it is being connected to many points. Similarly, here the berries being eaten by the green fly, butterfly and the grasshopper. Similar way, this grasshopper is going to have the plantain which is present in the water. Similar way, the berries, it is being eaten by this titmouse. There is a bird. Again, this titmouse is going to eat the ladybird. Similarly, the buzzard, in the sense it is type of a eagle, it is going to eat the snake, this titmouse, normal mouse, or the rat, rabbit. And similarly, the titmouse, it is being eaten by the fox. Again, the snake, they will be eating this titmouse. So this is called the food web. So this ends the part of the ecosystem. Thank you.